look, you get some good people. I've got a fantastic mental health nurse, and he's one of the only ones. And I've had psychiatrists and doctors and people with lots of letters at the end of their name, but none of it means anything if they don't care. If I'm in a room and I feel like I'm just a burden to you, it's just not going to work. It's not how much you know, it's how much you care, essentially. Look, I don't need you to be my dad or my brother or my best friend or anything like that. I just want to sit in the room and feel in my intuition that this guy cares enough to pay attention for like half an hour. And it's quite devastating that that's very hard to find. It's very hard to find. I'm not joking. I've been through the system for 3 decades. So not all mental health conditions are treated equally, unfortunately. Some of them are seen as actual character flaws, and it's like a character problem. And this isn't just in the sort of general public. This is part of the, psychiatry, doctor, GP machine as well. There's some that won't see some people with certain issues. There's some that have a sort of energy towards a certain thing because they just assume it's all one way. The NHS is essentially just a salesman for the pharmaceutical industry. They treat treatment-resisted mental health problems or treatment-resistant depression with just layers of polypharmacy. And then you sort of get to this place where you're on like 7 or 8 different tablets at once, and now you can't untie the knot of what is a original symptom and what is a side effect. And then you just go around in circles and circles and circles for years and years and years. That has been that's what I've seen in my life over different generations as well, not just one generation, multiple. There's a line in Pennyroyal Tea where he says, I'm at the end of my time with everyone, Kurt Cobain. And that actually touches on something quite true that people don't really realise, is that like goodwill towards a certain situation is limited. It's limited, it is, because everyone's time and energy is limited, so of course it's limited. So there comes a point where your support system will have different appetites for despair. So some people don't have a support system at all, and they fare off even worse. Some people do have a good support system, but everyone will come to a point where it's like, them again, like, what? There's always something wrong with them, or you'll get like, not walking around eggshells with you, they just start to get this sort of resentment that builds, and like a passive aggressive sort of like, just what's wrong with you? There's always something wrong with you. No, I don't think a lot of people realise that. People who've had mental health problems their whole life will most certainly know that. Most certainly they will know that. And people do burn through their support networks and end up in the abyss. And then just as there's a limited amount of goodwill, there's also a limited amount of endurance one can take with the medical system. So my dad reached the end of that. I saw that. He was literally dying. He couldn't walk, and there was something seriously wrong with him. But he'd been in and out of the NHS system his whole life. He was just done with it. He said, "No, I'm done with it." And then, my brother gave him the phone, 111. He just went, "Go away," put the phone down, and the next day he died. So that's a real thing as well. Just as goodwill has a limited amount, a human's amount of will to tolerate incompetent medical systems is limited as well. So I worry about that. That's why I don't go to the doctors unless it's dire, because I don't want that to burn out, and one day I'm like, I'm never seeing a doctor again, because that can happen. Maybe you've had a job and you woke up one day, you went to the job and you're like, I think I'm done, like I'm never coming back here again. There's just something inside you that has a certain threshold, and once it's burnt through, it's burnt through, and that should be understood more and just thought about more. Let's try this again. Ironically, I wasn't feeling great yesterday. I've been thinking about this treatment-resistant mental illness, and I feel like a lot of it is like a war of attrition.
It doesn't really decapitate you or devastate you in one day. It's a gradual 1,000 cuts that eventually erodes you. So you have to develop endurance and fortitude. That is what carries you through it. Even in the face of there not being any respite at the end. Although I don't think that's always the case. Some people have been traumatised beyond repair, and it sounds crazy, but there are people like that. I think we're conditioned from movies to think that everyone has the light at the end of the tunnel, but there are some people that just fall by the wayside. And knowing that helps you because it creates more urgency. Puts you in the right frame of mind to survive. So a lot of it's to do with hope. And the removal of hope makes a human being in a state of despair, because without hope and meaning, then you weigh life in the scales of joy and sorrow. And if the scales tip in the direction of sorrow, you might deduct that time to exit the game, you know? But that frame is incorrect. You have to find your meaning. I think as well, you have to take on your illness or whatever in your own hands. And you have to deal with it yourself, really. I feel like relying on a stranger, you know, they might be well-intentioned, they might be very knowledgeable, but they don't live in your skin. So going on a journey of discovery, like a private detective, and identifying your specific problem. A lot of mine is to do with inflammation and diet and stuff like that. And you find the root cause, and once you find the root cause, you can hopefully, sometimes you find the root cause and you've passed the theory, but you can't pass the practical, and that's very, very frustrating. When you say to yourself, oh, it's that, it's X, so therefore, if I do Y, I'll feel better. And you might have a few weeks of doing Y, and then you're like, yeah, I've got it sus. And then you have one bad day, and the thing is with negative feedback loops, they're everywhere. One little thing can tip you off to doing that maladaptation, or it leads to that maladaptation, and it just circles downwards. You can also have positive feedback loops, but like going against gravity, it's much easier to fall than it is to rise. So yeah, death of 1,000 cuts. That's how it feels these days. Death of 1,000 cuts, 100%. And the medical system just seems to deploy layers and layers of polypharmacy. And then you're thinking, am I just being used as a consumer to make someone else money? And then you go through different doctors and psychiatrists and mental health nurse, and then there's no continuity. So every time you speak to someone new, they've got notes, which they've spent about 5 minutes usually, because I don't have time reading it. Look, you get some good people. I've got a fantastic mental health nurse, and he's one of the only ones. And I've had psychiatrists and doctors and people with lots of letters at the end of their name, but none of it means anything if they don't care. If I'm in a room and I feel like I'm just a burden to you, it's not going to work. It's not how much you know, it's how much you care, essentially. Look, I don't need you to be my dad or my brother or my best friend or anything like that. I just want to sit in the room and feel in my intuition that this guy cares enough to pay attention for like half an hour. And it's quite devastating. That's very hard to find. It's very hard to find. I'm not joking. I've been through the system for 3 decades. I write meticulous notes in my journal, and I ask questions because I'm not a mind reader, and my intuition is infallible, and maybe it's transference and all of that. But when you get older, you can distinguish what is fiction in your mind and what is fact. Especially when you say, "Do you enjoy your job?" and they go, That's quite objective. That this guy can't be asked, you know. Anyway, it's a struggle, and sometimes the medical system exacerbates things. You know, you look down the road and you're like, okay, I'm on about 7 or 8 different medications. So have I felt better? and then you have like a honeymoon phase with a medication. You're like, whoa, I've got it. You know, that people get antidepressants, or they get mood stabilizers, or they get, you know, Ritalin, which is Adderall in the UK, and they're like, whoa, like they have a moment. They're like, oh my goodness, is this how normal people feel? I've got it. I've sussed it. It's like, yes. And then there's like a tipping scale where it's like gradually getting less effective and you're getting more side effects, and then eventually you're just taking it just to exist, and you're like, how have I got here? And some faceless person who you've never seen is probably making hundreds of thousands of pounds off of you over the space of your life. I don't know, look, the system these days, it just doesn't feel right. Like, you guys have got to admit that. Like, I think people's eyes have opened a little bit since COVID. It's like, oh, okay, like, it's all a psyop. Not all, but you know what I mean. Anyway, long-term mental illness, man, it's difficult. It's a test of character over a terribly long span of time. You know, if I said to you, you have to endure one bad day, you're like, yeah, it's cool, but it's like you got to endure like this problem or diagnosis or whatever for the rest of your life. That's when your mind starts getting like, But it's not always for the rest of your life. It's not always like that. Sometimes if you go private detective enough on what's going on with yourself, you can help things, you know. But whatever you're dealing with, whoever you are in life, don't give up, man. Find your meaning, find your purpose, because without that, that is the foundation of which everything stands on. You need that. And try and look for a good therapist, for a good psychiatrist, and try not to give up hope. Even if you get round after round of apathetic, indifferent people that prescribe you just radically different things, ask for continuity. Don't be afraid to ask for a second opinion. But most of all, make sure you maintain your support network. Make sure you're looking after yourself. You know, the pillars: sleep, stress management, exercise, diet. You know, we know all this. But it's the foundations that help us, isn't it? It's the foundations. It's the boring stuff. It's not this new pill. It's not, you know. So see you next time. Next video is going to be about, it's going to be a big one. It's going to be about how will the future generations judge us by in retrospect. So say it's like the year 3000, they look back at us. You know, like we look back on World War II, Nazis, or communism and Stalin, you know. So what's going on in this age that we take for granted and take as normal, that the future generations are going to be like, that's barbaric. And I'm going to do it in like an iceberg. So see you next time.